Hello and welcome to the Beatport podcast with me, High Class Filter. On today's show, I'll be talking to arguably one of the most original electronic producers of the moment, Murlo. Having grown a dedicated following in recent years through his releases on labels like Mixpac and Butters, Murlo has just released his most ambitious project to date, entitled Dolos, a 15-track album that comes complete with an accompanying graphic novel designed and illustrated by Murlo himself. I caught up with Murlo just after the release of the album and spoke about how his art and illustrations intertwine with his music, his plans for his Coil Records label, and his upcoming audio-visual show. Before we get into my interview with Murlo, I'm starting you off with Fauna, one of the standout tracks from his new album.
Beatport Podcast.
You're listening to the Beatport podcast with me, High Class Filter, and I'm joined now over the phone by Murlo. How's it going?
Hello, thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm all good, thank you. Yeah.
And firstly, congratulations on the new album. How does it feel to have it out there and released and in the world?
Yeah, it feels really good. I mean, it's been such a long process with, doing everything like alongside each other and, kind of like sticking to my deadlines, and I have this like big checklist that I was like slowly getting through. So it all feels final now, which is really nice.
Yeah, I mean, I saw you tweet on the album release day that this album was such a long time in the making and it was a real kind of labour of love. So what was it about this point in your career that made you think the time was right for an album?
I think because I kind of look back at like some of my other releases and I just think, I can remember there was like points where I was like, oh, I could do like maybe an album now. And I look back now and think, oh, I'm glad that I didn't, because I feel I probably would have approached it differently. And I'm a lot more happier with how I approached it this time. And I've always done, I kind of teased like quite big EPs before. I did like Odyssey on Mixpac, and I think that was maybe seven tracks, which is, I guess, quite long for an EP. And I think a lot of people were kind of calling that like a mini album at the time. So like I've been working gradually towards like a bigger format, do you know what I mean? Like with the music. And I think moving away from the more clubby sounds and stuff, like it kind of lent itself quite well to like a longer format as well.
So in quite a unique way, along with the album, you've created a graphic novel to accompany the music. And I'm really interested in the process of doing something like that. Did you write the music first and let that inspire the story? Or is the album supposed to be treated as more of a soundtrack to the graphic novel?
It was kind of both. Like I was making the music as I was going along. So the main images on the left side of each page were kind of made alongside the music. So I think I had like maybe one or two tunes that I kind of springboarded the album from. And then I kind of like set out with writing a narrative, like very basic at first, but I knew like what I wanted it to kind of like flow like. So then I worked from that into like the music. So then I would like work on a tune for maybe a couple of days and then like start drawing that tune like visually and then kind of finishing them both, trying simultaneously, because I feel like if I did all the music then it would be quite rigid and it wouldn't be that flexible. So I've been trying to like do bit by bit. But the only problem with that is I spend a lot of time drawing. And then it's like a different process making music, so it was quite hard to kind of juggle them both. But I'm getting a little bit better at it now. I'm doing it quite a lot now. So it was just like like a process like that, really. Kind of a couple of days on music, a couple of days on visuals, and then trying to organise my life in order to be able to get it all done on time, which was really difficult.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's the third element to it, which is not just the music and the artwork, but the storyline as well. So how did you approach organising the art you'd been making, the music you'd been making, and then working that into a story and a kind of narrative?
I feel like the narrative actually really helped with a lot of stuff I wanted to do on the album. So I think people know me a lot for making quite like bubbly, I don't know, kind of almost like happy sounding melodies and stuff like that, which I usually kind of argue against because I always try not to. But I feel like with the story, like, because it's not necessarily like a really like happy story, so I wanted to use the narrative to kind of like push myself into making like darker music and like, you know, something that isn't necessarily as like happy. But yeah, like I feel like the story definitely helped in terms of sound design and sound palette and, you know, the choices that I made. It wasn't like I just made like 15 tracks and then just kind of try to figure out an order for them. I wanted like the story to kind of dictate what the tracks would sound like.
Yeah, and I'd say the album does have a kind of otherworldly or sort of cinematic sound to it. Can you tell me a bit more about some of the sounds that influenced you while you were making the album?
I listen to a lot of like video game soundtracks, and I've done a few NTS shows where I just kind of I played like cinematic music, like my favorite kind of. I call it cinematic because it is video games as well as movies as well as just like ambient records. So I feel like for me, like all that music is very visual, and I find like listening to that stuff while I work as well really helps. So there's a few Spotify playlists that I made to just kind of help myself kind of get in the frame of mind for some of the slower tracks on the album. I actually did a NTS show like really recently where I played through the album and then like interspersed like tracks that I was listening to while I was making the visuals in the album as well. So it was like a 2-hour version, I guess like an extended cut of
the director's cut.
The director's cut with just like, you know, just like music that I was like influenced by and stuff. So yeah, I have like this big playlist at home where it's just like, you know, stuff from like the Silent Hill soundtrack and all sorts really. Yeah, like I've got so much stuff that like I've collected over like the years that just really helps me get in that kind of mood.
So talking more kind of specifically about the production of the album, how did you approach creating those sounds, particularly on tracks like Fury's Call and Peace, which aren't really informed by electronic music or club music as much as some of your previous work?
Yeah, I wanted to make this kind of like a main theme that you get on like a video game. So I had this melody and I just kind of kept experimenting with different instruments. And at first I was going down more an orchestral route with the main thing, but then I started like playing around with VSTs and making like a kind of accordion sounds. I wanted it to be like almost like a string ensemble or something, like for the main melody, but then that kind of warped into this. I don't know what I'd call it. Like a lot of the sounds that I make, I just try and make it so it's like a blend between like something quite organic, like strings, but then kind of warping it so it's a little bit kind of electronic as well, and you have like more kind of control over the pitch bending and stuff like that. Yeah, my idea for the piece was a lot more like video game inspired for that. Furious Call, I used a VST that basically had a lot of like choral samples, as in like, you know, they would sing like the phonetics of like me, lee, dee, da, or that kind of thing, and I kind of wrote all the MIDI for it, and then I wanted it to sound like a real orchestra, and like these sounds were so like lush, like the samples, that it was just like really easy to do that. So I think I would love in the future to kind of do something, not necessarily a band, but like a kind of mini symphony, or like especially with Furious Core, it'd be nice to have like a real life kind of choir to sing that. That was always my aim. I wanted it to kind of sound really real, but then also slightly artificial, because you can tell a lot of the MIDI things that I put in there would be very difficult for a human to to do. I did like a couple of other choral songs as well, and they were a lot more extreme with what I did with the MIDI. But yeah, like I wanted it to sound very organic towards the end of the album.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting that you mention that contrast between having those live sounding elements and then kind of manipulating those in an electronic way. Because in the graphic novel, one of the themes throughout is people's interactions with nature and the natural world, and then contrasting that with a lot of technology and kind of urban landscapes as well.
Yeah.
So what was the thinking behind that theme, and what message were you trying to convey?
I did a lot of research on like old folklore from like pre-Roman Britain, and I find it really interesting with, you know, that connection with nature, and I've been getting into my plants a lot more as well. So I really like how, you know, how it can sit quite awkwardly, but then again sometimes it can sit quite nicely together. So yeah, I did a lot of like kind of back reading, like back story kind of thing for the novel. I've done it in my last. I did a series of prints as well, at an exhibition later, like last year, called BioLife, which was along the same lines as well, and that was more kind of to do with like artificial intelligence, and then but also like mixed with, you know, the kind of nature and, you know, escaping into the forest. So I guess that was the foundations of the album as well.
You mentioned your plants there. I feel like the interview wouldn't be a Murlo interview without asking about the plants. I feel like I'm quite kind of familiar with your plants now. Like it feels like someone posting photos of their kids on Facebook or something like that.
That's basically it, isn't it?
So how did the plant kind of the plant obsession begin? And asking on a personal level, do you have any tips for someone who has a track record of accidentally killing their plants?
Well, it's always case for case. You can always find the underlying problems with what's someone doing to a plant that's like making it unhappy. But I started getting into the plants like maybe like August time, I think. Actually, I was always collecting plants actually a little bit before when I had a studio, so about a year or two ago. But I really like kind of stepped up a gear like last year. I think I work in my studio is my flat, so like my living room is kind of split up in two parts, where like half of it is like a desk and like, you know, my equipment and stuff, and then the other half is where my sofas are and the TV. And I was increasingly spending more and more time not on the office side but drawing, and what I was like optimistically thinking was going to be like where I detach from work and I can like chill out, and then it became just like merged together at some point because I was spending so much time in my flat that I was kind of driving myself a little bit mad. So I needed like another focus. Yeah, my focus was my plants, and then I just started really getting into it. So it was nice just to turn my attention to something that wasn't work when I needed to kind of relax or just chuff for just like an hour or two. So I'd like repot a plant, or I'd nip into town and pick up a new one. And yeah, so like that was it really.
mentioned your exhibition that you put on last year, which I came down to, and I heard you talk at the exhibition. I remember you saying that growing up, art was kind of your first love, and the music side came a bit later. So can you tell me a bit more about the music side, your journey in music and how you got started with DJing and making music?
So I started DJing when I was at uni. I studied illustration, so we had to do fundraisers to kind of make the money up for the final exhibition in London. So we like people in our like year, like in our like class would just start DJing. So I knew one guy that was DJing a long time, and his background was garage. So like that's kind of how I got into like deeper into garage than what I would have heard before. Like I didn't really hear it in clubs and stuff when I grew up in the Midlands. Like it was on radio and stuff, but it was like it turned into quite a big passion. So with that I started DJing, just kind of doing like little support gigs then after that. And then I think my first show outside the UK was Amsterdam, and that was like quite early on as well. So that was like a big thing for me, and then I decided I really liked it. But I was always working and stuff on the side. It was always just like something I did as a hobby, and I wanted to be like an illustrator. I wanted to do that. I've always wanted to do that since I was a kid. But then I kind of realised, I think I got a little bit kind of disillusioned with the industry and like how it works. And, I kind of realised that it was maybe not what I wanted to do. And I kind of stressed myself out a little bit about that. And then next thing I know, I was like making music while I was still working in like retail and stuff. And then slowly like the music kind of was taking off a bit more and more. The more it did, the more it kind of spurred me on to like get better and like teach myself how to make better music. And like when I first started, I was practically tone deaf. Like I listened to some of the remixes that I made and they were like completely out of key and stuff, like. But yeah, then like I don't know, I slowly got better and better, and then I found my footing with music. And then when I introduced like my art back into it, it kind of made me really happy because I feel like I managed to make a full circle then.
At what point did you kind of start to bring the art kind of back into the music side? I feel like it's something you've been exploring more and more recently, kind of leading up to the album.
I always did my own EPs artwork, and I did bits and bobs. Like it never really made sense until I think I did the EP for Glacial Sounds, which is like the Last Dance EP, and that was when I was like kind of first trying out CGI, and then I was like, oh, this is cool, like, I can create these like little environments and all this kind of stuff. And then I did a music video for the Intermiss video for Rinse, and then that was when I was like, I can create these like grander environments and like kind of really try and stretch it out a bit more. Then I kind of stopped doing CGI because I found that every time I wanted to make something, I would have to just spend hours like watching YouTube tutorials about something that's like vaguely what I wanted to do, and then like try and figure it out, and it kind of got a bit frustrating. So yeah, then moving back to 2D was like really nice because that was what I was always comfortable with as well, and I grew up drawing, so it was like if I wanted to make something, I could literally just draw it, and it was so much faster. Well, I'll say faster. It wasn't faster because I wanted to do stop frame animation, which is very laborious. But it was a lot easier to kind of see the results in front of my eyes. CGI, you would have to set up it and like set the cameras, and and then I had a bad computer at the time, so I'd have to send it to a render farm, and then it would come back and I would just notice a detail that I needed to change, and I'd have to do it all over again or something. But yeah, like it all started making sense generally about like Intermissed time, and then after that I was like I wanted the idea of like creating this other universe, which was good because it meant that I can just like have this continuity with all my work then, and that's what I kind of felt like a lot more happy with, just the combination of the two.
You released your Club Coil EP a couple of years ago, and then since then you've kind of built up this sort of Coil world or Coil universe. You've got your Coil Records label, the Coil show on NTS, the Coil night in London, and I think that the Coil is referenced in the graphic novel as well, isn't it?
Coil books.
So that creation of that concept and that sort of world within a world, what is it about that approach that you kind of find appealing?
For me, it's really easy to, like, when I'm making something, to picture where it would be played or what function it would have. So making these little kind of, I had the record shop for the label, and that helped me visualize what I wanted to do with the label a lot more. And like I kind of treated it like it was like this kind of, it was a shop in this district of the city. And then the club Coil, which was like the fictional nightclub that was like the EP was based around, and then were featured quite heavily in the AV show as well. And that was nice, just being like, okay, this is made for the club. This can exist here, but it would still, it wasn't detached from everything else I was making. So it was like, it still existed in this world. It was just like, it was functional for what I wanted it to be. So I think with the EP, the album, sorry, that was like a chance for me to kind of take it out of the city, and it still exists in this universe. It's just like he just leaves the city, the district, the core district, and I just love the idea that like it's not just a completed project that is left behind. Like there can be references, and there could it happened, so it it all has this connection with everything else. It's just something that like really helps me come up with ideas, and like that's what I've always been into. I love world building. I love like sci-fi and fantasy, and the meticulous details that like writers, like people like William Gibson, who like kind of can also like create this environment where like all these stories can happen, but they maybe aren't so connected with each other, but they just, the knowledge that they all exist in the same world helps you kind of really get into what he's trying to do. And like you don't have to just build this thing every single time. It's like if you've read the other books, like what type of world this is based in. So already when you start the book, you can just see everything, if you know what I mean.
Do you think the album will be the kind of culmination or sort of the conclusion of the Coil world, or is that something you're planning on continuing?
There's still so much stuff in my head that I can do with this environment, and like I think once it becomes a part where I'm like, there's nothing more to do here, like maybe that's when I would move on, but I don't think that's going to happen for a long time. It's nice because it means like with the album I wanted it to reference all these really, really old kind of stories and like folklore and stuff, but it was fine because he left the city, even though it's the same time. It's just like I like that melding of like kind of like time scales and stuff, and it's like in the future as well I can see it expanding, so I guess it's just something that I'm going to keep like kind of experimenting with.
So we mentioned your label Coil Records before, and so far the label's mostly been a platform for your own projects, like the album, and some of your collabs as well. So what have you got planned for the label in the future? Will you be bringing in more new artists to feature on the label?
Yes, but I'll leave the details out at the moment because we're still setting it up. But yeah, there's a few people that I would love to kind of. There's some people that I still haven't talked to that I'd love to have on the label, and then there's people that I am talking to right now. But yeah, that will probably happen this year, and I've already kind of spoken to one person about the introduction into the world and stuff, and like the label's only kind of really released my stuff or like collabs and stuff, so it's been very much like I've been kind of at the helm. So it'd be nice to like have like the input of other people that feel kind of like they I love getting like ideas from other people if they have any like input and stuff, because obviously like if I was to release someone else's music, I wouldn't want to kind of take charge as much as I have in every aspect of my own music. So I always like asking like like how do you visualize your music, like how do you see it, how do you see it fit like in like visually like in the world. And I always want to kind of meet people halfway and like see what they like, what their ideas were and stuff. It's nice. I started kind of reaching out more to other people for like creative ideas now. Like I just used to just want to do everything myself. Like in terms of like the AV show, for instance, I just that was quite intense with trying to do absolutely everything myself. And I got friends. I've got my friend James, who is like a After Effects whiz. I'm going to be like kind of talking to him about certain like ways of being able to use the programs which I didn't teach myself, if you know what I mean. So yeah, I'm getting better at reaching out and kind of talking to people and sharing ideas and stuff now.
It seems like musically a lot of what's come out on the label and also what you've been playing on the radio show seems to be very focused on like garage and bass. Do you think that's something that we can expect to kind of carry on hearing from you?
I don't really know what's gonna happen with my next few releases. Is the Murlo project. So it's like, I think now the album's done, I guess I'm just kind of gonna settle a little bit and think about what I want to do, I guess. I really enjoyed making stuff that wasn't club ready, I guess. I mean, there are a couple of tracks on the album that you could play in clubs, but I really like the freedom of just like, kind of not worrying about if it's going to get played somewhere. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, I'm still really into garage and everything like that. I think the music on the label, like you said, it's been very, very clubby, very, dancey. So I will be releasing like other stuff that's more like the album has been the first thing on the label really that has been different to that. And I feel like it would be nice to, if I was releasing other music, would not just be dancey but also be like wider, more cinematic and stuff as well, just to kind of reflect like what I wanted to do with the label. So like the label for me isn't necessarily a dance label. Like it's just a label that would like hopefully umbrella like all of like the influence and stuff that I like. So it's not just dance but also other stuff as well.
So you mentioned your AV show as well there. So you actually announced the album originally through your AV show, didn't you? Kind of,
yeah. I did like the announce at Club Coil. That I kind of had the video set up. That was more kind of like DJ sets. That was, but yeah, the AV show is obviously I'm working on the AV show now. So as soon as I finished the album, I had to go straight onto it. I've got some stuff sorted for that that's going to be announced soon. And obviously I'm doing Sonar as well this year, which has like been like amazing really. I've kind of wanted to do that for a long time, so I'm just at the moment just kind of in the early stages of just really nailing the AV show, wanting to make it kind of grander and bigger.
You're not allowing yourself a cool down period after the album release. It's like straight onto the AV show.
I mean, you know, the last couple of weeks I've gone on a couple of day trips to like the beach and stuff, which has been good to clear my head. But now constant work, it's all good. It's like, you know, I enjoy doing this. Like, and if I didn't, I wouldn't do it. So it's like, it is work, but at the same time, it's like the work couldn't be any more enjoyable. Like, it's definitely what like I've wanted to do for a long time. So it's like, as long as I just make sure that I'm not cooped up too much, and I give myself breaks, it's a pleasure.
I kind of noticed that with your exhibition last year when you were streaming on Twitch, and obviously you were working then, but it had that kind of fun element to it as well. That I think like you could really tell that you were sort of really delving into your work and kind of getting a lot out of it as well.
Yeah, I'd love to start up that Twitch again. Like, it was good because it felt like having it stream. It made me a lot more like I would catch myself procrastinating a lot more because I'll catch myself before I procrastinate. So it's like I'm a big procrastinator, so I'll just do a little bit of drawing and then go off and like do something without even thinking, and then going back, oh, I was drawing, like I need to go on with it. But when I was like doing my stream on Twitch, it was like I felt like someone was over my shoulder the whole time. So I just got on with it and I did loads of work, and so I might do it again just for production. It's nice kind of talking to people as well, and like people that came in onto the chat room, and we would just like kind of chat about general stuff, or they're asking me questions about like how I colour something, or you know how I do this or that, and equipment or anything like that. And it felt quite social, which was nice, because I think drawing or doing a lot of work is quite antisocial unless I have someone over and they all can watch a film or something, but I'd still draw. But the majority, like 90% of the time, it's like me just on my own on the sofa drawing on the tablet. So I'd love to do the Twitch again and like maybe do like a kind of scheduled stream, maybe like 3 or 4 times a week or something, just for like a couple of hours. And it really helps with like the process as well, because sometimes when you can't come up with ideas, it's just good just to draw, and it's like not having the pressure of knowing that you need to do something specific. You can come up with ideas doing that. So
yeah, I mean, I guess you can probably draw a parallel there with what you're saying about the antisocial element, with working on music kind of being cooped up in the studio. And I think probably a lot of creative people do have that kind of easily distracted frame of mind. So do you have any strategies or tips that you use to make sure you don't get too easily distracted or procrastinate too much?
I'm so guilty at doing it that I feel like I shouldn't be giving out any advice. The thing with drawing though is like you can listen to music, you can put on films, you can do a lot of other stuff when you're drawing. But when you're making music, it's like you're using your ears and you're using your eyes. So it's like there's very little you can. I find I can focus on making music a lot easier than drawing, because I would put something on. If it's music while I'm drawing, I can focus fine. But for some reason, I always put on like TV shows or something, and that is not good. So I wouldn't necessarily advise doing that too much if you're drawing, because I procrastinate so much that way. I think just making sure that you eat right and making sure that like you give yourself breaks stops you from getting distracted, because I tend to do that. I tend to like get in a hole where I'm just like, I've skipped breakfast and lunch, and I've not left the flat for a few days, and you kind of feel really crap. And that's something that I'm still like working on. But I always find that if I do make sure that I do make sure that like I'll give myself a little break, I can focus a lot better.
Beatport Podcast.
Thanks again to Murlo for coming on the show. His album and graphic novel are out now on his label, Coil Records. For the rest of the show, I'll be getting into the mix with some of my favourite bass music of recent weeks, starting you off with Hugo and Fiona McMartin with Cold Fingertips. track you're listening to now is Earth Nut's remix of Fork and Knife. The track's called Mini Magnum. Earth Nut have had a great year in 2019 so far, and I'm predicting more great things from them in the future. track's called Salt and Pepper, and it's my pick from the latest EP from DJ Plead, which is out now on Nervous Horizon. As always with Nervous Horizon releases, you can expect to hear a huge range of influences on the EP and some seriously intense percussion. That's all I got time for on today's show. Thanks for listening, and another big shout out to Murlo for coming on today's podcast. I'm leaving you with a track from Rapture 4D called Magnetic Attraction, taken from his new EP out now on Terror Rhythm. My name's High Class Filter, and I've been with you for the last hour here on the Beatport podcast. I'll be back soon with another very special guest. Catch you next time.
Beatport Podcast.